Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever watched those numbers tick up at the fuel pump and thought, what exactly am I paying for here? Well, you are in the right place.
Because what if I told you that the 102 rupees and 12 paise per liter written on a Delhi petrol pump isn't actually the true cost to produce that fuel? And get this, what if the domestic ethanol alternative, which we often hear is the cheaper option, might actually cost more to manufacture before taxes even come into play?
All right, let's just dive right into this. To really grasp India's fuel economics, we've got to stop looking at just one big number. We have to separate it into four completely different buckets: international crude oil, the refining process, domestic ethanol, and explicit government taxes. We really have to pull these apart to see what's actually going on.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll look at the anatomy of a liter, compare the UPA era to today, contrast petrol and ethanol production costs, uncover the reality of your mileage, and finally, weigh consumer costs against national policy.
Starting off with Section 1, the anatomy of a liter, from international crude to the local pump.
You see, the journey starts with international crude oil, right? But obviously, you can't just pour raw crude directly into your car's fuel tank. That raw material has to be shipped across oceans, go through incredibly complex refining, get processed to meet strict BS6 emission standards, and then be blended with ethanol before it even reaches a local depot. Every single one of these steps adds to the fundamental cost way before we even start talking about taxes.
Now, looking at the exact breakdown of that 102.12 rupee Delhi retail price, check out the massive green section. That represents the broad pre-tax fuel component. Compare that to the blue sections for central and state taxes. Seeing it laid out like this completely changes how we look at that final receipt.
So the number we really need to focus on is this one right here. 69 rupees and 18 paise. This is the broad, non-tax, pre-dealer chunk of the price. It covers the physical fuel itself, the refining process, blending, freight, and the oil company's operating expenses. Basically, this is the bulk of what you're actually paying for, the massive physical reality of getting a highly complex chemical product to your local pump.
On the flip side, explicit taxes, so that's your central excise, cesses, and Delhi VAT combined, total up to 28 rupees and 49 paise. That means taxes currently make up about 27.9% of the final retail price. Now look, that is still a significant burden, for sure, but it completely busts the popular myth that more than half of your fuel payment goes straight to the tax man today. While that might have been closer to the truth in the past, it just isn't the reality of today's breakdown.
Moving on to Section 2, the UPA era versus today, and the exchange rate impact.
If we impartially compare May and June 2014 to today, it reveals a pretty fascinating reality about the 30 rupee and 71 paise retail price increase we've seen since then. While taxes did rise by 6 rupees and 20 paise over this period, the broad fuel component absolutely surged by an astonishing 22 rupees and 6 paise. Meaning, the absolute largest chunk of the price increase wasn't actually taxation at all. It was the core cost of the fuel itself. But wait a second, why would the fuel component surge when international dollar crude prices actually fell slightly between those periods? Well, the answer is the exchange rate. The dramatic weakening of the Indian rupee from around 59 to $1 to over 95 completely wiped out any international price advantage. It proves a vital economic reality check. A drop in global crude prices does not automatically mean cheaper retail petrol if your currency is weakening at the exact same time. That brings us to Section 3, production cost of petrol versus ethanol, and the physical manufacturing reality. Take a look at the estimated production costs for petroleum petrol compared directly to the varied agricultural feedstock costs for ethanol. This comparison is honestly so eye-opening. You have to remember, ethanol is derived from things like molasses, sugarcane-juice, and maize, and all of those have their own intensive agricultural processing costs attached. At current moderate international prices of around $70 per barrel, the raw crude equivalent input for petrol is actually just 42 rupees and 11 paise per liter. Now, obviously that's before the shipping and complex refining we talked about earlier, but it establishes a surprisingly low baseline cost for the raw material. Contrast that with ethanol. The latest official weighted average delivered procurement benchmark for ethanol is 71 rupees and 32 paise per liter. Think about that for a second. At moderate crude prices, petroleum petrol is actually cheaper to manufacture per physical liter than the domestic ethanol alternative.
The government's own numbers acknowledge this price dynamic. But here's the catch. Even if those physical production costs were identical, there's a hidden variable lurking in the chemistry.
Let's uncover that in Section 4, Energy, Reality, and Mileage, and why looking just at the per-liter price is misleading. Here's the science of it. Ethanol simply does not contain the same calorific value as pure petrol. It has a lower energy density. So you can't just look at the price of the liquid itself, you have to look at the energy contained within that liquid, because that's what directly dictates how far your engine can actually travel. To put it simply, 1 liter of ethanol contains roughly 67% of the energy of 1 liter of petrol. So, to get the exact same amount of driving power as 1 liter of petrol, you'd have to spend over 106 rupees on ethanol. This makes ethanol substantially more expensive when you look at it on a pure equal energy basis.
Because the E20 fuel blend, which is 20% ethanol, contains about 6.6% less energy overall than pure petrol, the real metric we as consumers need to be watching isn't cost per liter. The true, honest metric for your wallet is the cost per kilometer.
Let's say you're driving an older, non-optimized vehicle that experiences a 6% drop in mileage on E20 fuel. You're going to need to buy more fuel to travel the exact same distance you used to. So, your effective expenditure to go that distance leaps from the stated 102 rupees and 12 paise pump price all the way up to roughly 108 rupees and 64 paise. You are quite literally paying a hidden premium.
Which brings us to Section 5, the final critical verdict: economics versus national policy.
So if ethanol can be more expensive to produce and it actively reduces your mileage, you're probably asking, why is it so heavily mandated? Well, while petrol might win on immediate consumer economics, ethanol acts as a massive insurance policy for national energy security. It reduces India's heavy dependence on oil imports, shielding the country from global supply shocks. Plus, it keeps money circulating domestically, directly supporting Indian farmers and local industries instead of just sending those dollars overseas.
Ultimately, the ethanol blending program is much better understood not as some guaranteed cheaper fuel policy for the everyday consumer, but as a strategic balancing act. It's weighing immediate consumer costs against the long-term health and security of the entire national economy.
As our source material brilliantly puts it, the consumer isn't just purchasing fuel. The consumer is paying for crude oil, refining, farming, energy security, taxes, and public policy, all packed inside that exact same liter. So the next time you're standing there watching those numbers tick up at the pump, you really have to ask yourself a bigger question. Are you willing to accept paying a slight premium on every single kilometer as a necessary national insurance policy for energy independence? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the numbers, and I'll catch you in the next one.